Hello everyone and welcome back to WAAARGH Studios, and today we look into the great green menace that is the Greenskins, and possibly my favourite Xenos race. These guys are just ridiculous and I think that's one of the things I love so much about them. They are violent lunatics that are also hilarious. They are barbarous psychopaths and yet comedic. They are one of the last vestiges in Games Workshop where humour is one of the most important aspects of the entire culture, as it were. As we're talking about orcs, it's culture with a K, and all kinds of words have Ks and Zs and Ws in front of them for all kinds of random reasons, just because it sounds cooler, because when you have Ks in front of things you speak more like an orc. Anyway, orcs and greenskins. I'm going to do this series a little bit like the Space Marines, where I break it up and I talk about the different aspects of how greenskins are, what their units are, how they fight, how they operate, and any famous characters they may have. So, where to start? The best place to start, as always, is in the beginning. So way back when the old ones were creating their races, because the Necrontyr and the Catan were kicking their butts all over the galaxy, the old ones created a race known as the Orks, who we are pretty confident now were the original Orks. An incredibly violent, brutal and simplistic race. They were fantastic because of their ability to essentially repopulate themselves without any real interference. Let me explain. So when an Ork dies, its body creates spores that seep into the ground and come up as mushrooms. Those mushrooms, over time, will create new Orks. Yes, Orks. Orks are mushrooms. Orks are a strange amalgamation of beast, mushroom and sort of monkey-like humanoid type thing. But effectively, an orc's body is so tough because of this fungus-like nature that they can withstand an insane amount of punishment, far more than any human could even conceive of. There are orcs who've had half their head caved in and still fighting for a good solid hour before they realise that their brain's gone. There's orcs who've had arms ripped off and will keep on fighting, bashing whoever ripped their arm off over the head with their severed arm. Orcs can bleed for hours before they actually start feeling any real effects. They can lose limbs without really having too much trouble. Orc anatomy is so good at regenerating itself that if an orc had an arm hacked off, a couple big staples putting the arm back on should be enough for it to just reattach itself. With enough time and with enough care, that will be sufficient. So what happens is, when an orc spore is created, it becomes a mushroom. That mushroom will eventually grow to become a Gretchen or Grots. These are the smaller, slightly less offensive, but by no means kinder creatures of the orc race, and they tend to be responsible for the more fiddly, cunning aspects of orc technology or duties. It is unfortunately the Gretchen's job in life to be bullied by every single orc. And as well as Gretchen, these mushrooms will also create squigs, angry fungus bouncing balls of death with teeth. You know those space hoppers that people used to have? Oh, maybe that's just showing my age. But imagine essentially a big bouncing ball that's red, typically speaking, with teeth, bad temper, and an evil sense of humour. That is effectively a squig. And squigs are so versatile that they can actually be repurposed for many things. Most of the time, orcs keep their favourite squig around as a guard dog, because they're not really tameable, but at the same time you can trust them to bite things that get too close. And as this orc society grows, as there are more orcs that condense within a certain area, the orcs become, I guess you could say, become smarter. The concentration of orcs means that their ability to invent and be creative increases. This is effectively because they unlock certain ideas and thoughts within their heads. To put it simply, certain orcs are bred for certain purposes. So for example, there will be a particular kind of mushroom that will be created. Usually these are cultivated by the Gretchen or Grots, who essentially help particular spores grow faster than others. So for example, if the orcs reach a certain size and they start really thinking to themselves, I'd like to have metal weapons now, or I found this lump of metal and I don't really know what to do with it, but it seems to cut things or bludgeon things really well. We need an orc who's going to basically improve on this. It's not really as well thought out as I'm suggesting. It really is haphazard, as everything is with the orcs. But effectively, at some point, there will be an orc that will be born that will have the ability to basically go, I know what to do with this, and he'll go off and he will gather materials and he will experiment and he'll make things. things that shouldn't necessarily work, but they're usually based on Imperium technology or ramshackle bits and pieces that they just cobble together. So really early orcs, for example, will work out how to make spears, bows and arrows, like swords, like really basic stuff. But as the orc tribe gets bigger, and especially if they are near a human settlement that have technology like, combustion engines and guns, then the orcs will, at one point or another, nick this tech and they will study it, in a manner of speaking. They will improve on it. They'll basically just cobble together loads of guns, sellotape them together, and then just put one trigger for all of them, and then call it a big shooter. This is what orc technology is. It basically finds stuff, decides it can improve it this way by making it bigger and louder, and that's more or less how orcs make their kit. So eventually this orc tribe that's kept growing and growing and growing, and if it's on a planet with any kind of industrial centre, will get better and better equipment, so like bikes and trucks and buggies, and eventually, potentially, it'll get things like walkers, like killer cans and death dreads, some of my favourite models. And this is all basic, relatively, for the orcs, this is all relatively basic stuff. Orcs don't really have any particular allegiance to a overriding hierarchy, as it were. An orc will only follow another orc so long as that other orc is bigger, stronger, and can demonstrate and prove how big and strong they are. This is why an orc society never gets more complicated than a clan. An orc clan is essentially a group of orcs who, for whatever reason, usually cultural groupings, decide to work together. And these clans are repeatedly infighting, breaking apart, forming new clans, and then, the same happens again. And these clans are constantly fighting each other, breaking apart, forming new clans, get bigger, fighting each other. You get the idea. But there are 6 significant clans that have the most distinctive characters, cultures, colours, and methodologies of war. And these clans distinguish themselves a lot. This could be possible because of how this is partially due to their environment, but mostly due to smaller clans being absorbed by these bigger clans and then becoming something different. You have your Goths, Evil Sons, Bad Moons, Snake Bites, Blood Axes, and the Death Skulls. The Goths are possibly the best stereotypical orc clan. They love nothing better than hearing really, really loud guns, having really heavy choppers, and just getting stuck into close combat. Because of this preference for close quarters combat, they are famous for their sheer number of orcs. We're talking thousands upon thousands upon thousands of orcs. These orcs prefer to fight on foot or occasionally hitch a lift from a truck so they can get into battle faster. They are bad-tempered, flatulent, yes, flatulent. Orcs pride themselves on the ability to make horrible smells and have a strange obsession with having horned helmets and making weapons out of anything they can find. And if they can't find a weapon, they'll just headbutt you. Their colours tend to be black and red, with a bull-like orc symbol. They view themselves as the best orcs ever. As far as they are concerned, they are Gork's might made manifest, and their biggest boss is Ghazghkull WAAARGH Flacker, who we've briefly touched on earlier on in the video. But I will talk about Ghazghkull when we get to the characters. Named characters. The Evil Sons are an equally massive clan, although with a bigger preference for speed. They love bikes, they love trucks, they love tanks. It is in fact from the Evil Sons that the Speed Cult, a sub-clan, basically travels across all the different clans, came from. The Speed Cult is, they're orcs obsessed with speed. These are orcs who are so obsessed with speed that their belief in painting things red will make it go faster actually works. This is why the Evil Sons have some of the fastest vehicles in the galaxy for orcs, and their symbol is a red sun with boar-like teeth and spiky spirals out on the outside. An Evil Sun orc is all for the adrenaline rush at the speed. An Evil Sun orc who walks into battle looks like an idiot to his co-workers. The Bad Moons are the richest out of all the orc societies. The reason for this is because this particular strain of orc, or clan of orcs, seem to grow the biggest teeth and produce the most amount of teeth out of any other orc. As a result of this, these orcs can buy equipment from other clans and, they get the best stuff. The biggest guns, the flashiest gear, the best food, and the biggest choppers. It is from the Bad Moons that Flash Gits, a particular unit of Orks specialising in devastating custom shooters. The Bad Moons have a symbol of a yellow moon on a green background, and these Orks are, well, just ridiculously rich. They use all this wealth to get all the money they can, and they are less concerned with close combat. They just love big guns that make tons of noise, or massive walkers which make tons of noise. Exist from. In fact, they just like anything that makes tons of noise. And now for a very different direction, the Snakebite clan. The Snakebites in fact shun technology in almost all forms, depending more on their squigs and squig-offs for transport and for food and for domestic duties than any kind of technology. They very much believe that the old ways are the best ways, and the most technological they'll get is the occasional shooter, but that's it. The Snakebites have a symbol of a venomous serpent, which reflects their belief in how Orks should be the toughest creatures around. It is standard practice for snakebite Orks to find poisonous snakes, get them to bite them to prove how tough they are. Snake bites kind of travel across the galaxy more by accident than on purpose. There might be an Ork clan that finds a group of snake bites, beats them up or corrals them into coming along on their WAAARGH, and they'll hitch a lift on board the ship. But do not underestimate them. Snake bites are known for being some of the toughest Orks in the galaxy. The Bloodaxes, famous for being the first Orks to be encountered by the Imperium. It is in fact experiencing their fights with humans that they develop their own, dare I say it, tactics, often looting Imperial vehicles and repurposing them for their own needs. And they are actually willing to learn from humans, and even in very rare cases they will work with them as mercenaries. Don't get me wrong, they're more often than not they'll turn on them as soon as they think that there's better money to be made elsewhere, but the Bloodaxes are famous for being Orks that can actually learn and actually be stealthy and actually cooperate with others. It's a very, very interesting clan. Their symbol is 2 red axes with a Ork skull on the top. And yeah, these Orks are fascinating for their ability to actually cooperate with humans and restrain themselves long enough to not just deck the human over the head before the human hands over the money. In fact, it's this ability for them to actually restrain themselves and be cautious in a way that makes them fantastic commandos. Bloodaxes are famous for having Orks who are capable of going undercover per se, hiding out in the jungles and springing ambushes better than any other Ork culture, any other Ork clan. It's actually a very impressive feat for an Ork, especially when you consider how blooming huge these creatures are. And finally, you have the Death Skulls. These are the best looters, snatchers and grabbers that the Orks have ever produced. They will loot everything, and they will even take the nails that tried to hold the thing down that you were trying to stop them from looting. Their mechs are an integral part of their society, who build the biggest guns, tanks, walkers, and cobble together all the scrap they find into unusual inventions. In fact, it is Death Skull mechs who are proficient at constructing combi weapons, due to their ability to just take random guns, stick them together, and it somehow doesn't blow up in the wielder's face. Orks don't particularly like Death Skulls because they tend to find that they will nick everything from the other clans, and this sort of starts fights. But they can't deny that the Death Skulls are also fantastic at making all kinds of interesting things. Looting Land Raiders, Leaving Russes, Predators, Baneblades, Titans, anything they can find to make their own strange conversions. And this is probably why they're one of my favourites. Their symbol is a horned skull with bones underneath and painted blue, because the Death Skulls believe, in fact all Orks believe, that blue is a lucky colour. So if red makes you go faster, blue makes you lucky. Ork society is surprisingly straightforward. At the bottom, you've got your Gretchen and Squigs, who are looking after the gardens and tending the mushrooms and, cleaning out toilets and all that kind of jazz, helping the other Orks with more technical fiddly things. You have your standard Ork, who is your, frontline busybody fighter. Knobs, just to clarify, an Ork Nob is a shortening of the word noble. So an Ork Nob is essentially the knight class, I guess you could say. Although considering a nob and knight is quite a hilarious concept. But essentially, these are the noble class of Orks. And above the Nobs, there is the War Boss. And sort of either side of a war boss, there will be a weird boy, basically your shaman psyker. You'll have your mech, who will be your technical advisor, and then you'll have a pain boy. The pain boy is a doctor who has taken way too many meds and has decided it'll be hilarious if he can sew your head onto your armpit, or sew 2 heads onto your neck, or attach a random gun onto your arm. A pain boy is sort of someone you go to if you don't have any other choice, because a pain boy doesn't like doing boring operations, he likes doing something interesting, and he'll be assisted with his Gretchen and Grots. And if any anaesthetic is involved, well, you better hope you've got an orc mate nearby with a gun pointed to the pain boy's head, with strict instructions to shoot him if he attempts to do anything than what you've asked him to. So how do orcs, do basic things like trading? Like, do orcs trade with each other? Well, yes, they do. Gretchen, as well as other orcs, do trade goods with one another, or more often than not, they'll steal it first, or try to, but if they can't steal it, they will attempt to trade, and orcs' currency is teeth. Yes, teeth. They grow very large, pointy tusks. Usually, an orc will discuss the terms of their trade, decide on how many teeth it's worth, and then the orc will go outside, if he doesn't have a bag of teeth in his pocket already, and just punch himself in the face until a tooth comes loose, and then pay the subsequent person their fee with said tooth. And this is kind of hilarious because orc currency can't inflate, because teeth degrade over time and, dissolve and lose their value, which is why old orc teeth are worthless in orc society. It has to be relatively fresh. So yeah, orcs often go around punching each other in the face. Is sort of their way of stealing money from each other, which is an amazing way of thinking about money. The richest clans, like the Bad Moons, have such prodigious teeth that they just are worth more, which means they can buy better, bigger things with them. Now, not all orc clans will ever grow big enough to have all these positions fulfilled, because this takes a lot of time and a lot of infighting, and you need a certain number of orcs for this kind of stuff to happen. They can't really do this unless they grow to a big enough size that they become intelligent enough. I don't want to say it's like a hive mind, because it's not. It's not a hive mind. The orcs are all very much individual and are all trying to beat each other up or beat everyone else up in order to become the biggest and strongest. But it is that more orcs gathering one place means that more interesting things can happen for them. It's a kind of psychic effect. It's the same reason why an orc psyker, who isn't channeling the powers of the Chaos Gods or the Emperor of Mankind, he is challenging the power of the WAAARGH, the power of the joint gods Gork and Mork. The orcs can never agree on which god is more powerful, because Gork is brutal but cunning, and Mork is cunning but brutal, and they can never decide which is which or who's more powerful, and that often ends into religious fights amongst themselves. But then again, the orcs just like an excuse to fight, so hey ho. But back to the point. When the orcs gather in mass, this psychic build-up becomes such that orc psychers can do more impressive things. So an orc psyker by his lonesome can't really do all that much. The orcs' power, the power of the WAAARGH, is their belief in themselves that they are right. It's the belief that they are invincible. An orc, naturally, doesn't ever consider to be vulnerable. As far as it's concerned, doesn't ever die. Which is technically speaking true. Even if an orc dies, it releases thousands of spores into the ground that create more orcs. So the orc never really dies, per se. So anyway, once the orcs have gathered in sufficient numbers, they will then declare what is called a WAAARGH. This you could equate to a crusade of sorts. It is essentially a call to arms to go and beat up the biggest thing they can find and take over the planet, more or less. And some WAAARGHs are so big that they span entire sectors, and WAAARGH, by far the biggest and baddest orc that currently lives, has declared multiple WAAARGHs and smashed apart and obliterated various sections of the galaxy. Orcs, when gathered en masse, are really hard to stop. As I said earlier, you can cave their head in and they'll still keep fighting. They're just that absurdly tough. You need Astartes if you want something to go toe-to-toe with these, because the average human will just be ripped apart by an orc. And when it comes to las guns, the orcs will die to a las gun round, but it'll take a couple unless you hit them in just the right spot. So the history of the Orks, which I feel like I've brushed backwards and forwards over. When the old ones disappeared, the Orks basically were left to their own devices. The Eldar could keep them in check because they were still relatively primitive and not very good at getting off planets. But in time, the Orks can achieve anything, really. It's sort of like the 1,000 monkeys in a room with typewriters making the great works of Shakespeare joke. Give the Orks enough time and they will invent anything, including spaceships, which they have. And partially through belief, partially through their psychic optimism, as I like to call it, these things fly. And Orks will fly through the warp using the mechs who control the ships are even able to make warp jumps, but no Gellerfields, so as soon as they jump into the warp, they get attacked by demons. And Orks love this. They wouldn't even consider making a Gellerfield to prevent this, because an Ork gets bored really easily, and having a fight on board ship is just a way to pass the time. And this has basically been the history of the Orks. They've had several leaders who've popped up, Ghazghkull Maguruk Thraka being one of them, who have dominated sections of the galaxy, and the Emperor of Mankind even slew a war boss who apparently was the size of a mini Titan, an enormous specimen that only someone like the Emperor would have any chance of going toe-to-toe with, unless you bring a Titan. And I think the main reason why I love these guys so much is because they just make hilarious things happen. You can count on the Orks to be everywhere, to do whatever they want, and if you give them an obstacle, they are the race that literally just goes, "Hold my beer, I'm going to go do that thing you claim is impossible." And they will do it through sheer stubbornness, willpower, and bloody-minded determination, as well as a complete refusal to accept reality. And I love their cobbled-together inventions that they create. Their massive walkers, their trucks, their buggies, their bikes, all very Mad Maxy, cobbled-together junk stuff. It's just amazing to look at. And the squigs are cute. I'm not gonna lie, the squigs are cute. So, I really wanted to expand a bit more on the history section of this, but there's not really that much to tell. Orks have got, there are Ork WAAARGHs that are flying around the galaxy causing all kinds of mayhem, but they don't really have an agenda. That's a lie, sorry. Orks have an agenda, but really all it is find bigger, badder things to beat up and beat them up so they can get bigger, badder, stronger. Their motivations are so simplistic that there's nothing complicated. The Orks have found for themselves a kind of paradise in their way of thinking. They don't need to be overcomplicated like the Eldar. They don't need to worry about holding their territories like the Imperium. As far as an Ork is concerned, so long as it has a gun and a big chopper and an enemy in front to fight and food, it doesn't care. And even when Orks get grumpy with each other, they just beat each other up, which is perfectly fun for them too. So yeah, I think I'm actually going to call that a day with the Ork video for the moment, just because I think the more meaty stuff actually comes into the kinds of units, clans and equipment that the Orks tend to use. Maybe I can go look into some more specific Ork events in the future. Would any of you like to see that? Put a little like and a comment down below if you're interested in the various shenanigans the Orks get up to, because they are more often than not hilarious and also horrific at the same time. So anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. I am so excited that we're getting closer and closer to 50 subscribers, and I cannot thank you all enough for your support. It really, really does mean a lot to me. And like I said, if you'd like to see more or want to have any questions about it, put a like and a comment down below, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care, everyone.